David Platt has introduced some views. I'm keeping this very broad and generic for a reason. He's introduced some views that are causing division in the church, specifically racial division and racial issues in the church. What is the correct way to understand critical race theory, intersectionality, systemic racism, white privilege, white supremacy, anti-racism? That whole conversation David brought into his church, and now I believe is seeing the effect of what CRT is. Not what it does, but what it is. It's a dividing device. It is a mechanism that is built for destruction. That's what critical race theory is. The effect of it is that it does cause division, and I fear that's exactly what they're seeing at McLean Bible Church. Big division, acrimony, lawsuits because of CRT. And David Platt, I have no doubt, introduced these teachings with the best of intentions.
NBC is no longer McLean Bible Church, but it's now Melanin Bible Church.
I think it was Noam Chomsky who said, if you want to start a revolution, come up with a slogan that nobody can reject. Social justice, who would reject that? Black Lives Matter, who would reject that? So the camel's nose is in the tent at that point, because and then you don't want to be a racist, and you have to realize that people have been mistreated in the past, and so all of that is framed up. And what just was so disturbing to me, and that's why I was part of that meeting, and that's why I think that statement is so well done. What was so concerning to me was people were jumping on that bandwagon before they really thought what they were getting into. Because in the first place, I've said this through the years, justice doesn't need an adjective. Justice is justice. Social justice is another term for socialism. It's another term for taking money from one person and handing it to another one. It's basically a euphemism for equality of outcome. You can have equality of opportunity, but you can't guarantee equality of outcome. But social justice wants to guarantee equality of outcome by taking away something that this person has earned and handing it to someone who didn't earn it. So it was just a front for socialism. There were years and years of underlying, underbelly developments to tear down democracy as we know it in America underneath that. And I saw that for whatever reason. Critical race theory, like all critical theory, is iconoclastic. All it wants to do is destroy, destroy, destroy. And there's a simple way to understand that, okay? Here's what I saw coming. We are, as white people, or non-African American people, the culprits in everything that's wrong in this society. And the people who are suffering because we've done them wrong systemically. So pushing this a little further, there's a guy named James Lindsay who's an atheist. Pretty remarkable insights for an atheist. He sees a lot of things that evangelical leaders don't see. Lindsay says, here's the bottom line, and he's an evolutionist. He's saying the notion here is this, that human beings come into the world as a blank slate. They have no innate characteristics, and they have no unchanging, immutable characteristics, okay? And even gender. Okay, you come in as a blank slate. You're the only being in the evolutionary chain that has no immutable, innate characteristics. You're just a blank slate. And so the culture will frame you. It'll tell you what gender is acceptable, what behavior is acceptable, and so forth. So the idea strikes a blow against God as creator, creating us in his own image. We bear the mark of God, and those are immutable characteristics. And he created the male and female, and that too is immutable. But we can see in the transgender movement that one has to be attacked overtly because it's so stupid. So if you believe that everybody comes in as this blank slate, I read a story about a woman who had a baby girl, but she didn't want the child to be influenced as to gender. So one week she gave the child trucks, and the next week she gave the child dolls, and then trucks and dolls, and came back after a few weeks and found the dresses on the trucks. So this is the insanity that comes out of the chaos of confusion there. But that is the notion, so that the purpose in that is so that I'm not responsible for what I've become. You are, because you patriarchal white people systemically built into the fabric of this culture the kind of things that made me what I am. So it's not my fault. So what do we have to do? Not change things. We can't just change things because you're still in power. We have to burn this thing down to the ground and replace that with a completely different group of people. So that's when you look at social justice, systemic racism, critical race theory, it is an effort to completely abolish everything we've known as life. One of the most interesting aspects of it is what's called research justice. I don't know if you've heard that. Research justice means if you're a white guy in a university, your research is unacceptable. You're on the outside. So if you take out the research of the white guy or the Asian guy, you blunt progress. I mean, it's absurdity, but that's how iconoclastic it is. That's how devastating it is, and that's why it's a burn down deal. It wants to burn down, it wants to end capitalism, private enterprise, like the Bolshevik Revolution. It wants to go back down to nothing. It doesn't have to rebuild, because when there's a flip and new power structure comes, they'll rebuild it the way they want. So how in the world evangelicals could buy into that and get seduced by feeling guilty for being white as if they mistreated people is just bizarre. Has everybody been treated the way they should be treated in the world? No. Has anybody been treated the way they should be treated in the world from a divine standpoint? Well, not yet, because we're still alive and we're sinners enough. We should have been judged long ago. But just on a human level, the one thing the sinner wants to do is blame somebody else for his sin. And so when I started to attack this, I went through a series on Ezekiel 18 of individual responsibility. If we tell people they're not responsible for what they are, you just cut them off from the Savior. Because, you know, if I don't come to grips with my own wretchedness, and that's a challenge anyway. Jesus said they hate me because I tell them their deeds are evil. So this aids and abets the sinner's pride, that I'm a victim, not a criminal, not a perpetrator. And I think people bought into it because they didn't want to be called a racist instead of responding biblically. And now that was a trap. That was a complete setup. Once you decided to buy into it and you start confessing your whiteness, whatever in the world that ridiculous. If you're going to confess something you really are guilty of. But that kind of virtue signaling, kind of spiritual grandstanding is absolutely meaningless, and it just aids and abets.
Black professing Christians were even farther on the right side of the scale, more prone to explain racial inequality due to discrimination in American systems and structures. Now, here's the point. I'm obviously not saying all white people believe this over here, all black people believe that. I'm not even saying this is the perfect way to ask these questions. I didn't come up with the research. Here's what I took away from it, though. What was so eye-opening for me when I saw this was to realize that basically, the more Christian you are, so to speak, the more divided you are on the issue of racialization.
MBC is no longer McLean Bible Church, that it's now Melanin Bible Church.